Last September, Moldova, and to be honest, most of the EU, was celebrating the re-election of President Maia Sandu's pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity, or PAS, after they won another outright majority and soundly defeated their more pro-Russian competitors. Less than a year in, however, and the government is already having trouble. After a series of scandals in the past couple of months, on Friday, the Moldovan Prime Minister suddenly resigned, putting Sandu in a difficult spot. So in this video, we're going to explain what's going wrong for Sandu and her new government, and what might happen next. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So to understand this story, you need a bit of context about Moldovan politics. Since gaining independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, Moldova's politics has been defined by competition between a more pro-European bloc and a more pro-Russian bloc. This was the story behind last year's parliamentary elections, which were essentially a two-horse race between the pro-Russian Patriotic Electoral Bloc, comprising the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Heart of Moldova Party, and the Future of Moldova Party, and the pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity, or PAS. PAS was founded by former Education Minister Maia Sandu during the 2015 to 2016 protests, amid growing dissatisfaction with the ruling parties, and quickly became the dominant pro-European party in Moldovan politics, winning a landslide at the penultimate elections in 2021. Sandu herself is, according to polls, both the most well-known and trusted politician in Moldova, and has been president since 2020, winning a second term in 2024. Anyway, last year's election resulted in another victory for PAS, who won just over 50% of the vote and 55 seats in the 101-seat parliament, more than twice as many as the Patriotic Electoral Bloc, who won just 24% of the vote and 26 seats. PAS generally performed well in central and western Moldova, while the Patriotic Bloc's support was heavily concentrated in three specific regions: Transnistria, Gagauzia, and Moldova's northern districts. For context, Transnistria is an unrecognized but de facto independent state that broke away from Moldova proper in 1992 and has consistently pushed for closer relations with Russia, while both Gagauzia and northern Moldova have relatively large Russian-speaking populations, largely as a consequence of so-called Russification policies implemented by the Soviet Union. Anyway, these results, and especially the relatively weak showing from the pro-Russian parties, was widely interpreted as solid evidence that Moldova was firmly on a pro-European path, and only last month, the EU voted to open Moldova's first cluster of accession negotiations. However, in the past couple of weeks, the new PAS government, and thus Moldova's pro-European trajectory, has apparently been put in jeopardy by a series of scandals. Things really kicked off last month, when the head of Moldova's Civil Aviation Safety Agency, Moldatsa, was dismissed after his university diploma and pilot's license turned out to be forged. There was another scandal surrounding Maia Sandu's cousin, who was allegedly given a public relations job at Moldatsa, and then took a series of raises that took her salary to 8 times the national median, and about 4 times that of Sandu herself. In response, last Thursday, a special committee was established to investigate Moldatsa and other state-owned companies, but this wasn't enough to stem the scandal, and on the same day, PAS's Minister of Agriculture was detained on suspicion of bribery. This all culminated in the resignation of PAS Prime Minister Alexandru Montanu on Friday, who announced his resignation on his Facebook page. Montanu's resignation, and specifically the bit where he said he felt that he could no longer exercise my mandate in accordance with my principles and beliefs, sparked some tension with Sandu herself, because it was widely interpreted as implying that Sandu wasn't giving him enough freedom, and perhaps that she was defending her cousin behind closed doors. Sandu was quick to push back on this. At the press conference following the resignation, she insisted that speculation that he wanted to combat abuses but was not permitted to do so is false. The Prime Minister had a free hand to run the government as he saw fit. In more evidence of intra-party tensions, Sandu also took a veiled jab at Montanu, saying she had expected, quote, greater involvement in difficult decisions and a stronger public presence to listen to people's concerns. This is probably a fair criticism, but it also speaks to a broader problem for PAS, namely that they're very reliant on Sandu herself. Now, of course, this would be a bad look for any government, but it's particularly rough for PAS and Sandu, given that they have previously campaigned on an anti-corruption platform, arguing that Moldova needs to sort out its corruption problems if it's going to have any chance of joining the EU. Unsurprisingly, this does seem to have affected public opinion. While polling isn't carried out that frequently in Moldova, the latest poll we could find, with fieldwork carried out in mid-June, put PAS on just 38% of the vote, well down from the 50% they won at last year's election and the worst poll for them since. It's also worth saying that, whilst PAS are still the most popular party in Moldova and were polling well before this recent spate of scandals, they've struggled to really get the economy going, which hasn't helped them electorally. Inflation, for instance, has hovered around the 7% mark for the past couple of years, while growth hasn't been brilliant either, coming in at 2.4% last year, but falling to just 0.4% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2026. Now, to be clear, this isn't entirely the government's fault, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Moldova is trying to move away from Russian gas and has been hit hard by other global events, including, most recently, the war in Iran. Nonetheless, it still creates a sort of political headwind for Sandu and co. So what happens next? Well, Sandu has already made it clear that, unsurprisingly, she's not going to call fresh elections, and instead plans to appoint a new prime minister from within PAS. Sandu will probably be able to form a new government, but this will become more difficult if this period of scandal rumbles on or even escalates. And the risk for Sandu is that, even if it doesn't bring down the government, these scandals could hurt PAS's image with Moldovan voters, making it more difficult for them to win the next election. Furthermore, these scandals might hurt Sandu's and PAS's reputation amongst existing EU member states. This could both undermine Moldova's accession prospects and PAS's appeal within Moldova as the only party able to actually get Moldova into the EU, which is one of the main reasons they've been so electorally successful in recent years. All in all, even if this doesn't bring down the government, and we should stress this looks unlikely at the moment, it's still bad news for PAS. This is an incredibly nuanced story though, with plenty of outlets reporting on it online, and even now we can see that there are 111 sources reporting on it. But how can we be sure that what we're reading isn't hugely biased? Well, that's a problem that we face when making these videos too, and luckily that's where this week's sponsor Ground News comes in. For this story in particular, most of the sources reporting come from the left. If we dig deeper into how the story is being framed, you can quickly see the contrast in how the story is being reported across the political spectrum. Some sources on the left emphasize the scandals behind the resignation, while right-leaning sources shift their attention to the suddenness of the resignation. We're only able to get this level of deep analysis and transparency in reporting because of Ground News, who we've been partnered with since 2023. Their incredible website and app collects thousands of articles, putting them all in one easy-to-access place to help expose outlets' political bias, how reliable their reporting practices are, and who owns them, with all of this information backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. By now, you must know how much we appreciate Ground News, and how we're such massive fans of all of their features, but especially their blind spot feed. If you're not familiar though, this is where you can discover everything that's being disproportionately reported by one side or the other, whether it's a mile from your house or on the other side of the world. But that just scratches the surface of what Ground News has to offer, as they're completely subscriber funded, so there's no corporate influence deciding what you see. And we've partnered with them to get you the same 40% off unlimited access Vantage plan that we use. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description. Go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.